Join us as we search Alaska and beyond for mysterious creatures, featuring Beans Baxter and Rob Roy Menzies. This is the Alaska Bigfoot Studies. All right, guys, welcome to Alaska Bigfoot Studies. I'm here with Beans Baxter on an epic Bigfoot expedition. Now we are in Kachemak Bay, and you checked the GPS. How many miles are we from Port Chatham?
So we're about 34 miles as the crow flies from Port Chatham.
So that's close, and like a bear could travel that in a day if it wanted to. I think a Bigfoot could do that easy. So I wanted to talk about your book. Now, you've written several books, but probably one of your best sellers was the book you wrote on the Port Chatham incident.
Yes, it's called Abandoned, The History and Horror of Port Chatham. And it just talks a little bit about the legend surrounding Port Chatham and the history of the town and what led up to it being abandoned, and the history of the Nantinaq creature that the natives say lives there. It's a kind of a Bigfoot-like creature, and there's a lot of different thoughts and ideas around it. Some of it very closely mirrors the Kushtaka legend from Southeast Alaska, and some of it is very much like our, Pacific Northwest Bigfoot. So, I went on a couple of expeditions out there, and I thought, man, there's no books on Port Chatham. So I wrote one. I did it myself. I do it myself, like Thanos. And I wrote the book, and it actually did very well. It was actually Amazon bestseller after it first came out, and it still sells very well today.
And people can find it easiest through Amazon?
Yeah, they can get it on Amazon. There's a Kindle format, or you can buy a paperback copy. And also, if you want a signed copy, you can buy it off of my website. It's alasquatchpodcast.com. There's a little store on there.
And from what I've read your book, and I liked it, the hairy man of Port Chatham was not like a very nice Bigfoot, was it?
No, there's a lot of tales of aggressive and violent encounters. They suspect he may have been responsible for some disappearances and deaths. And if you think about it, Port Chatham, it's at the very southern tip of the Kenai Peninsula.
Yeah.
If you think about it, it's the perfect storm for an aggressive Bigfoot encounter. The town was built up around the logging industry and fishing industry. So they're cutting down the trees, they're taking the environment,
Yep.
they're catching all the fish, they're taking all the food, and you're on the southern tip of a peninsula, I think it's the west, there's the Harding ice fields. So really, if you think about it, if there's Bigfoot there, they're kind of backed into a corner, their environment's being taken, their food sources being taken, and in my opinion, that's probably a perfect storm for a violent encounter with any animal, let alone a Bigfoot.
Yeah. Now, at one point in the story, I remember the Bigfoot threw like a big piece of machinery, like an engine block, or what happened there?
So there was a logger named Andrew Camlock, and he was out one day working by himself, and he didn't come home, and they found him dead at his work site, and they said he'd been hit with a piece of machinery that was too heavy for a man to lift.
Wow.
Obviously, nobody saw a Bigfoot do it, but it was suspected that it could have been done by the Nantinaq. I really dove really hard into that case, being a former police detective. I couldn't find his death certificate, but, it's Alaska, and a lot of this happened, what people don't realize is this happened, before Alaska was a state. All this stuff happened before Bigfoot was a thing in the lower 48. It happened before the PG film. It happened before the Jerry Cruz tracks were found. So this predates all of that.
Yeah.
And Alaska wasn't a state yet. Record keeping wasn't the best. It's hard to explain to some people that haven't been to Alaska or have been in the lower 48 their whole lives. Record keeping isn't our priority here, especially back then.
Yeah.
You'll call someone from a village and be like, hey, I'm looking for these records. And they'll be like, oh, well, they were out in the shed and the roof collapsed under a snow load and they all got wet and they're gone. We threw them away. And that happens a lot. But I think that maybe in one of the nearby villages, there may be a paper trail. Maybe Mr. Camlock's death certificate is in a family Bible somewhere. tucked away, and maybe someday it'll see the light of day, and we can see what his cause of death was ruled on the death certificate. But for now, all we have basically is the account from his family.
And so many hairy man stories from different local tribes go back to the oral tradition, which could go back hundreds, if not thousands of years.
Right, and the Dena'ina people have a creature they call the Nantana, which is
Right.
very similar to Nantinaq. And I believe, from what I've read, Nantana means the ones that steal us.
And the Kanaitsi tribe is an offshoot. They're part of the overall Dena'ina language family, and they're about 60 miles that way.
Yeah,
And sometimes they had some tussles. Now, were the people here Alutiiq or Sukbiak?
they're Alutiiq.
Okay, interesting. So one thing I had to point out, because I did read your book, and this story mirrors in some ways the story of Gabriel Fox, in that the original, how do you say the hairy man name?
Nantinaq.
Nantinaq. Uh, in the legend of the village, it used to be a human who like went into the woods and transformed into a hairy man. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's the story of Mumchuck, who was a hunter, and he was out with his hunting party one day, and he tells his hunting party, he says, "Hey guys, drop me off on the shore. I'm turning into the Nantinaq," and they kind of humor him a little bit, just knock it off, and he gets kind of violent with them. So they finally they don't have a choice. They just drop him off on shore, and not too long after that, he showed up in the village, but he was already starting to transform, and he couldn't really talk good. He was starting to talk in grunts and whistles.
Oh, crap.
And he ran into some of his hunting party, and he told them, he said, "Tell my wife and the kids to stay in the house, because I'm afraid I might steal them and take them into the woods and turn them into Nantinaqs,"
Wow.
which is pretty similar to what you hear from the Kushtaka legends, where
Yeah.
you get abducted and you turn into that creature.
It's similar to the story of Gabriel Fox from Southwest Alaska. I'll do another video on that. But we are not in the area. I initially wanted to go to an area much farther from civilization, a place called Rocky Bay that is also close to Port Chatham, but very, very isolated. Now, we are still off the road system. However, boats do frequent this area, and so people can get over here, and there are some hiking trails. So not quite as isolated as I want. We did find some tracks that I thought were interesting because they were, I mean, you're 5'11" and you couldn't like step that far.
Yeah,
So
it was a huge stride.
so big, long stride. We had a weird sound fly over our tents. This is more like a UFO story, but and especially the head of the bay, just 10 miles down there, 15 miles. It's a UFO hotspot since the 60s. But we heard, you described it as like a craft from the Jetsons go right over our tent.
Yeah, it was like a humming, trilling. I can't really make it, but and it didn't. I'm familiar with drones. I've been around a
Yeah.
lot of drones, filming and things like that, DJI drones, commercial drones, and it didn't sound like a drone. It didn't sound like propellers or anything like that. It was a humming, trilling, like sound, and it didn't sound. There's lots of eagles all over around us, and they fly over us all the time. It didn't sound like any kind of big bird. I don't know. I'm at a loss as to wonder what it could be.
And it
I
went
don't know.
right over our tents.
Yeah, it was about 6 a.m. in the morning. It was daylight. We were still racked out, and I thought about jumping out, but by the time it was, it was 5, 6 seconds. It just whoosh, it was gone.
Yeah, to me, I thought it was super freaky because I've been hunting for 10 years here. I duck hunt, and I know the sound a mallard, male makes when he's flying 50, 60 miles an hour. They make a whistling sound. And this was not that. I thought it was a jet, but then I was like, wait, it's right over our tents. It was going at least 50 or 60 miles an hour. It went right over our tents. It couldn't have been more than 10 feet above us. And it sounded like it was electric field was like ionizing and crackling the air around it. It was like, it sounded like a weird jet sound. And the first thing I know we both said that we thought, oh, it sounded like a spacecraft. So
Yeah.
it was right about 6 a.m.
Yeah, that was the first thing that popped in my head. Was it sounds like a little like you would what you would imagine a flying saucer to sound like, or maybe
Yeah,
like a little science fiction craft on the Jetsons or something. It just
yeah.
that's exactly what it sounded like.
There's no bird that could have made that. And I've had a lot of drones, and there was no propeller sound of that buzzing, whining propeller sound at all. And you know, some drones can go really fast, but a drone wouldn't have made that kind of sound.
Yeah, yeah. In retrospect, I wish I had dove out of my tent to take a look, but by the time I got my bug flap open and my rain flap open, I mean, it was,
Oh,
it was gone.
it was long gone. So that's our adventure so far. We've got another day here. We're going to poke around and see what we can find. But be sure to check out Amazon for Abandoned by Larry Beans Baxter and get the full account of the Port Chatham Bigfoot creature.